The Wolf and the Kid. There was once a little kid whose growing horns made him think he was a grown-up billy goat and able to take care of himself. So one evening, when the flock started home from the pasture and his mother called, the kid paid no heed and kept right on nibbling the tender grass. A little later, when he lifted his head, the flock was gone. He was all alone. The sun was sinking. Long shadows came creeping over the ground. A chilly little wind came creeping with them, making scary noises in the grass. The kid shivered as he thought of the terrible wolf. Then he started wildly over the field, bleating for his mother. But not halfway near a clump of trees, there was the wolf. The kid knew there was little hope for him. "Please, Mr. Wolf," he said, trembling, "I know you're going to eat me, but first, please pipe me a tune, for I want to dance and be merry as long as I can." The wolf liked the idea of a little music before eating, so he struck up a merry tune, and the kid leaped and frisked gaily. Meanwhile, the flock was moving slowly homeward. In the still evening air, the wolf's piping carried far. The shepherd dogs pricked up their ears. They recognized the song the wolf sings before a feast, and in a moment they were racing back to the pasture. The wolf's song ended suddenly, and as he ran with the dogs at his heels, he called himself a fool for turning piper to please a kid, when he should have stuck to his butcher's trade. The moral of the story is, do not let anything turn you from your purpose. The Tortoise and the Ducks. The tortoise, carries his house on his back. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot leave home. They say that Jupiter punished him so because he was such a lazy stay-at-home that he would not go to Jupiter's wedding, even when especially invited. After many years, Tortoise began to wish that he had gone to that wedding. When he saw how gaily the animals flew about, and how the hare and the chipmunk and all the other animals ran nimbly by, always eager to see everything there was to be seen, the tortoise felt very sad and discontented. He wanted to see the world too, and there he was with a house on his back and little short legs that could hardly drag him along. One day he met a pair of ducks and told them all his trouble.
"We can help you see the world," said the ducks. "Take hold of this stick with your teeth, and we will carry you far up in the air, where you'll be able to see the whole countryside. Keep quiet, or you'll be sorry."
The tortoise was very glad indeed. He seized the stick firmly with his teeth. The two ducks took hold of it, one at each end, and away they sailed up towards the clouds. Just then a crow flew by. He was very much astonished at a strange sight. "This must surely be the king of tortoises." "Why, certainly," began the tortoise. But as he opened his mouth to say these foolish words, he lost a hold of the stick, and down he fell to the ground, where he was dashed to pieces on a rock. The moral of the story is, foolish curiosity and vanity often lead to misfortune. The young crab and his mother. "Why in the world do you walk sideways like that?" said Mother Crab to her son. "You should always walk straight forward with your toes turned out." "Well, show me how to walk, Mother dear," answered the little crab obediently. "I want to learn." And so the old crab tried and tried to walk straight forward, but she could only walk sideways like her son. And when she wanted to turn her toes out, she tripped and fell on her nose. The moral of the story is, do not tell others how to act unless you can set a good example. The Frogs and the Ox. An ox came down to a reedy pool to drink. As he splashed heavily in the water, he crushed a young frog in the mud. The old frog soon missed the little one and asked his brothers and sisters what had become of him. "A great big monster," said one of them, "stepped on our little brother with his huge feet."
"Big he was," said the frog, puffing himself up. "Was he as big as this?"
"Oh, much bigger," they cried.
The frog puffed up still more. "He could not have been as big as this," he said.
But the little frogs all declared that the monster was much, much bigger, and the old frog kept puffing himself out more and more until all at once he burst. The moral of the story is, do not attempt the impossible. The Dog, the Cock, and the Fox. A dog and a cock, who were the best of friends, wished very much to see something of the world. So they decided to leave the farmyard and to set out into the world along the road which led to the woods. The two comrades travelled along in the very best of spirits and without meeting any adventure to speak of. At nightfall, the cock, looking for a place to roost as was his custom, spied nearby a hollow tree that he thought would do very nicely for a night's lodging. The dog could creep inside, and the cock would fly up on one of the branches. So said, so done, and both slept very comfortably. With the first glimmer of dawn, the cock awoke. For the moment he forgot where he was. He thought he was still in the farmyard, where it had been his duty to arouse the household at daybreak. So standing on tiptoes, he flapped his wings and crowed lustily. But instead of awakening the farmer, he awakened a fox, not far off from the wood. The fox immediately had rosy visions of a very delicious breakfast. Hurrying to the tree where the cock was, he said very politely, "A hearty welcome to our woods, honoured sir. I cannot tell you how glad I am to see you. I am quite sure we shall become very close friends." "I feel very flattered, kind sir," replied the cock slyly. "If you will please go around to the door of my house. At the foot of the tree, my porter will let you in." The hungry but unsuspecting fox went around the tree as he was told, and in a twinkling the dog had seized him. The moral of the story is, those who try to deceive may expect to be paid in their own coin. Belling the cat. The mice once called a meeting to decide on a plan to free themselves from their enemy, the cat. At least they wished to find some way of knowing when she was coming, so that they might have time to run away. Indeed, something had to be done, for they lived in such constant fear of her claws that they hardly dared stir from their dens by night or day. Many plans were discussed, but none of them was thought to be good enough. At last, a very young mouse got up and said, I have a plan that might seem very simple, but I know it will be successful. All we have to do is hang a bell around the cat's neck. When we hear the bell ringing, we will know immediately that our enemy is coming." All the mice were very much surprised that they had not thought of such a plan before. But in the midst of the rejoicing over their good fortune, an old mouse arose and said, "I will say the plan of the young mouse is very good, but let me ask one question. Who will bell the cat?" The moral of the story: it is one thing to say that something should be done, but quite a different matter to do it. The Boy and the Filberts. A boy was given permission to put his hand into a pitcher to get some filberts, but he took such a great fistful that he could not draw his hand out again. And there he stood, unwilling to give up a single filbert, and yet unable to get them all out at once. Vexed and disappointed, he began to cry. "My boy," said his mother, "be satisfied with half the nuts you've taken, and you will easily get your hand out. Then perhaps you may have some more filberts some other time." The moral of the story is, do not attempt too much at once. The Eagle and the Jackdaw. An eagle swooping down on powerful wings seized a lamb in her talons and made off with it to her nest. A jackdaw saw the deed, and his silly head was filled with the idea that he was big and strong enough to do as the eagle had done. So with much rustling of feathers and a fierce air, he came down swiftly on the back of a large ram. But when he tried to rise again, he found that he could not get away, for his claws were tangled in the wool. And so far was he from carrying away the ram, that the ram hardly noticed he was there. The shepherd saw the fluttering jackdaw, and at once guessed what had happened. Running up, he caught the bird and clipped its wings. That evening he gave the jackdaw to his children. "What a funny bird this is," they laughed. "What do you call it, father?"
"That is a jackdaw, my children. But if you should ask him, he would say he is an eagle."
The moral of the story is, do not let your vanity make you overestimate your powers. Hercules and the Waggoner. A farmer was driving his wagon along a miry country road after a heavy rain. The horses could hardly drag the load through the deep mud, and at last came to a standstill when one of the wheels sank to the hub in a rut. The farmer climbed down from his seat and stood beside the wagon, looking at it, but without making the least effort to get it out of the rut. All he did was curse his bad luck and call loudly on Hercules to come to his aid. Then, it is said, Hercules really did appear, saying, "Put your shoulder to the wheel, man, and urge your horses. Do you think you can move the wagon simply by looking at it and whining about it? Hercules will not help you unless you make some effort to help yourself." And when the farmer put his shoulder to the wheel and urged on the horses, the wagon moved very readily, and soon the farmer was riding along in great content with a good lesson learned. Moral of the story is, self-help is the best help. Heaven helps those who help themselves. The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots, and acorns with a dash of cold water for drink. The town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little of this and a little of that, and by her manner making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather the town mouse talked about her life in the city while the country mouse listened. They then went to bed in a cozy nest in the hedgerow and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed that she was a town mouse with all the luxuries and delights of city life that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. There were sweetmeats and jellies, pastries, delicious cheeses, indeed, the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was about to nibble a dainty bit of pastry, she heard a cat meow loudly and scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place, where they lay quite still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. When at last they ventured back to the feast, the door opened suddenly, and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog. The country mouse stopped in the town mouse's den only long enough to pick up her carpet bag and umbrella. "You may have the luxuries and dainties that I have not," she said, as she hurried away, "but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it." The moral of the story is, poverty with security is better than plenty in the midst of fear and uncertainty. The Kid and the Wolf. A frisky young kid had been left by the herdsman on the thatched roof of a sheep shelter to keep him out of harm's way. The kid was browsing near the edge of the roof when he spied a wolf and began to jeer at him, making faces and abusing him to his heart's content. "I hear you," said the wolf, "and I haven't the least grudge against you for what you say or do. When you're up there, it is the roof that is talking, not you." The moral of the story is, do not say anything at any time that you would not say at all times. The Fox and the Grapes. A fox one day spied a beautiful bunch of ripe grapes hanging from a vine trained along the branches of a tree. The grapes seemed ready to burst with juice, and the fox's mouth watered as he gazed longingly at them. The bunch hung from a high branch, and the fox had to jump for it. The first time he jumped, he missed it by a long way. So he walked off a short distance and took a running leap at it, only to fall short once more. Again and again he tried, but in vain. Now he sat down and looked at the grapes in disgust. "What a fool I am," he said. "Here I am, wearing myself out to get a bunch of sour grapes that are not worth gaping for." And off he walked very, very scornfully. The moral of the story is, there are many who pretend to despise and belittle that which is beyond their reach. The Bundle of Sticks. A certain father had a family of sons who were forever quarrelling among themselves. No words he could say did the least good, so he cast about in his mind for some striking example that should make them see that discord would lead to misfortune. One day, when the quarrelling had been much more violent than usual, and each of his sons was moping in a surly manner, he asked one of them to bring him a bundle of sticks. Then, handing the bundle to each of his sons in turn, he told them to break it. But although each one tried his best, none was able to do so. The father then untied the bundle and gave the sticks to his sons to break one by one. This they did very easily. "My sons," said the father, "do you not see how certain it is that if you agree with each other and help each other, it will be impossible for your enemies to injure you? But if you are divided amongst yourselves, you'll be no stronger than a single stick in this bundle." The moral of the story is, in unity is strength. The Wolf and the Crane. A wolf had been feasting too greedily, and a bone had stuck crosswise in his throat. He could get it neither up nor down, and of course he could not eat a thing. Naturally, that was an awful state of affairs for a greedy wolf. So away he hurried to the crane. He was sure that she, with her long neck and bill, would easily be able to reach the bone and pull it out.
"I will reward you very handsomely," said the wolf, "if you pull that bone out for me."
The crane, as you can imagine, was very uneasy about putting her head in a wolf's throat. But she was grasping in nature, so she did what the wolf asked her to do. When the wolf felt that the bone was gone, he started to walk away. "But what about my reward?" called the crane anxiously.
"What?"
snarled the wolf, whirling around.
"Haven't you got it? Isn't it enough that I let you take your head out of my mouth without snapping it off?"
The moral of the story: expect no reward for serving the wicked. The Oak and the Reeds. A giant oak stood near a brook in which grew some slender reeds. When the wind blew, the great oak stood proudly upright with its 100 arms uplifted to the sky. But the reeds bowed low in the wind and sang a sad and mournful song.
"You have reason to complain," said the oak. "The slightest breeze that ruffles the surface of the water makes you bow your heads, while I, the mighty oak, stand upright and firm before the howling tempest.
"Do not worry about us," replied the reeds. "The winds do not harm us. We bow before them, and so we do not break. You, in all your pride and strength, have so far resisted their blows, but the end is coming."
As the reeds spoke, a great hurricane rushed out of the north. The oak stood proudly and fought against the storm, while the yielding reeds bowed low.
The wind redoubled in fury, and all at once the great tree fell, torn up by the roots, and lay among the pitying reeds. The moral of the story is, better to yield when it is folly to resist, than to resist stubbornly and be destroyed.